you, Subhashri. Is this on? And thank you, IHS. Thank you to the entire team who has made this festival possible and made all these conversations possible. So we had a mock conversation in the morning over breakfast that went in all different directions, and I'm supposed to tie it all together, which I don't know how far that will be possible, but so we're going to start with two clips, one from Namrata's Love, Sex and Dhoka, and one clip from Amare. Then we can...
सरात वाली से तो तेरी बातचीत है?
नहीं यार, वो ऐसी लड़की नहीं है।
अरे नहीं है तो बना देना। वैसे भी स्माइल दे रही थी तेरे को।
नहीं यार, वो काली सी बहंजी टाइप है, छोड़ना यार वो। नहीं।
अच्छा जी, बिना कपड़े के काली गोरी सब एक जैसी दिखती है। बोल, करता है? कब तक बचेगा कमेटी वालों से? बहंजी टाइप है, जल्दी पड़ जाएगी।
प्रणाम।
बाय रश्मि।
बाय।
तुम्हारे लिए खाना लाया हूँ, आओ खाते हैं। रोज वही ठंडा खाना लाती हो। मेरे ऑफिस में आज लेट नाइट कैंटीन खुली थी, तुम्हारी याद आई तो ले आया। अच्छे काम की आदत डाल दी तुमने। अब खाना है कि फेंक दूं? तुम्हारा बॉयफ्रेंड है? सॉरी, ऐसे ही पूछ रहा हूँ मैं। मतलब कोई होना चाहिए ना जो आपका ख्याल रखे, आपको समझे। नहीं, मैं ढूंढ दूं?
Rashmi, to the hospital, Rashmi! Rashmi! Nita! Rashmi!
तुम और हंसती क्यों नहीं हो यार? तुम्हारी स्माइल पे ना एक दिन क्लोजअप का ऐड बनेगा, देख लेना। तुम मॉडल बनोगी, तुम मॉडल।
ऐसे आप झूठ क्यों बोल रहे हो?
झूठ?
मुझे पता है मैं सुंदर नहीं हूँ।
रश्मि, तुम सुंदर हो यार। तुम बहुत सुंदर हो। तुम्हारे पास सब कुछ है, सब अंदर है। थोड़ा बाल दिखाओ यार, मार्केटिंग का जमाना है आजकल। एक तो तुम ये बाल कटा लो, फिर देखो तुम क्या होता है।
क्या होगा? आय हाय, मिस नेहरू मार्केट लग रही है आप तो। है, थैंक्स। बाल कटा के ब्यूटी क्वीन दिखाइयो। ऐसे थोड़े ज्यादा कट गए, कोई नहीं, अगले साल तो उग जाएंगे। चल, आज वैसे बड़ी जल्दी आ गई तू। है बाल दिखाने? वो जिस बंदे को गोली लगी थी ना, उसको देखने गए थे। अच्छा है। अभी गए थे मतलब? आदर्श ने छोड़ा।
അയ്യപ്പ, ഒരു മുണ്ടിങ് തന്നെ.
മുണ്ടിലിടാ. ഇത് മതിയോ?
ഇത് മതി. ഒന്ന് എന്താ? നമ്മുടെ ഹരിയില്ലേ, അവൻ ആത്മഹത്യ ചെയ്തു.
നമ്മുടെ ഹരിയോ? എവിടെ വെച്ചായിരുന്നു?
വയനാട്ടിൽ വെച്ചായിരുന്നു.
അറേബ്യയിൽ നിന്നും ബാബിലോണിയയിൽ നിന്നും റോമിൽ നിന്നും വന്ന ചരക്ക് കപ്പലുകൾ നങ്കൂരമിട്ടു നിന്നിരുന്ന ബേപ്പൂർ തുറമുഖം. ചന്ദനത്തടികൾ, മയിലുകൾ, സുഗന്ധദ്രവ്യങ്ങൾ എന്നിവയുമായി അവ തിരിച്ചുപോയി. കപ്പലുകളിൽ വന്നിരുന്ന ചിലർ ഇവിടെ ബന്ധങ്ങൾ ഉറപ്പിച്ചു. മറ്റു ചിലർ നമ്മുടെ സമ്പത്തുമായി തിരിച്ചുപോയി.
അമ്മേ, ആത്മഹത്യ ചെയ്ത ഹരിയെ ഒളിവിൽ താമസിപ്പിച്ചിരുന്ന ബാലേട്ടനെ ഞങ്ങൾ കണ്ടു. ആ ദിവസങ്ങളെപ്പറ്റി ബാലേട്ടൻ കുറെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങളോട് പറഞ്ഞു.
ആ, എന്താ പെട്ടെന്ന് എല്ലാവരും കൂടി?
ഒരു പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട കാര്യം പറയാനുണ്ടായിരുന്നു.
നമുക്കെന്നാ വീട്ടിലേക്ക് പോകാം. ഈ ഇത് ശരിയായി കൊടുക്ക്. ഒരു ദിവസം ഞാൻ ഉറങ്ങുമ്പോ ഹരി വീട്ടിലേക്ക് കയറി വന്നു. ഒളിയിൽ താമസിക്കാനായിരുന്നു. ഒളിയിൽ താമസിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ ഞാൻ രാത്രി വീട്ടിലേക്ക് വരുമ്പോൾ അവൻ പുറത്തിരുന്ന് മൃതകം വായിക്കുന്നു. ഞാൻ അവനെ കുറേ വഴക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു. എന്താ ഇത്? ഒളിയിലിരിക്കുന്നു പുറത്തിരുന്ന് മൃതകം വായിക്കുക, കേറിപ്പോകത്ത്. അത് അവന് വളരെ വിഷമായി. എനിക്കും.
For me, these two clips straddle two totally different types of cinema. One being plot driven and one being driven with a very different kind of an energy where the plot almost seems instrumental, or the plot of Hari, having died is interrupted through the entire film. So in this particular instance, it is in a sense interrupted by a visit to the fish workers union, and you sort of get into a different zone altogether. So both the films actually open up two totally different genres of filmmaking, but again interestingly both the films seem to suggest a very bound script that might have move the shoot onwards, but I'm sure the editors would have a very different sense. And both films also play with the sense of time. So while I found this clip very interesting because while it is the footage of 3 or 4 CCTV cameras, but it is also going back and forth in time. Whereas of course in Amaryan there is constantly, Hari keeps reappearing both in memory and in physical presence, another kind of history. So I thought these two clips in a sense opened up a whole bundle of ideas. So the first question is, so what is this process of re-scripting, and how do you negotiate the fact that there exists the burden of a written script, or if not a written script, the director's mind before the shooting and the rushes themselves. So what are the kind of things at play once you have to encounter your rushes? What is it that you are looking to pull through? So either of you.
Well, unfortunately with Amaryan it's not a very good idea about the script because we didn't have a script. What we did have was an idea. John had scripted the beginning of the film and the end of the film, and the rest was literally this journey that we constructed. This process, I would just like to say, the whole process of editing also is so non-reflective sometimes. I think as editors we go along so much with what we have as material and so on. So a question like this, how did I approach this was, I would say, we were very interested. The idea of intertwining the documentary portion, which the whole film is about, it's in fact a history of Kerala. And the only clue that was given to me is it's a journey from the northern part to the middle of Kerala. And also this story of this boy who has, who represents in fact a disillusioned generation. This was the post-Naxal generation of people in Kerala. I think I basically worked with the way I worked was that I first put together the journey. We constructed this journey very simply, which is that these people are traveling through Kerala and they're seeing all these things. And through this we had to also evoke this character. So it was, in fact, it was literally scripted on the editing table, because after doing the journey, we decided, yeah, this is how you sort of shift into the character, how memory now in the dialogue, the dialogue, the idea is to evoke this boy who was a tabla player, who was, so it was literally, it was a sort of double edit, if you know what I mean. We had one strain, we had the other strain, and it's difficult to explain the process, but there wasn't a script. There wasn't a script, but an idea. The idea of this memory, which was very important. The voiceover became a very important element that had to be written, literally written. So the voiceover was written later. So all these elements were put together on the editing table, yes. But it was just two narratives that were intertwined, yeah.
So over and above Amar, where is this process of editing, where in a sense you are re-scripting afresh, even in your other films, so what is it that you are looking to pull out, and how much of a burden of the concept or the script do you allow yourself to be weighed down with? Of course, I'm sure with each director the equation changes with each material, so it would, it would be a more general kind of response, but even if you can give examples, or if you want to come in about any other film or LSD, and then we can sort of take this.
Well, in the case of LSD, what happened was that we decided to make a very purist film of just one camera and not move it around at all, in this story especially. And we shot it like that, and we were very happy with it, and we did a cut, and then we started showing it to people, and the people said कि अच्छा अभी हमें लगा picture शुरू होने वाली है, and अभी तो कुछ हुआ ही नहीं ऐसे. I mean, there was no emotional connect, and our producer also was like कि I'm not getting into it. So then we decided to do a drastic cut. So Dibakar, the director of the film, told me कि okay, why don't you edit it like your God, like you can see anything, you can go anywhere, you can cut to anybody's clothes, irrespective of the CCTV. And I think that completely changed the language of the film. I mean, in this case, this is not what we had set out to make. In fact, I was quite surprised to see it today after many years. And of course, I mean, films do get, like, I call it the aata gundoing process. For me, it's that. Like, you have all the raw material, you have all the ingredients, but the shape, you can keep giving it in the edit. I mean, depending on how much time you have.
But this shape is what I'm interested for both of you. What are the elements that you are looking to, in a sense, pull out of the atta?
Well, I would say it's the script that you're trying to pull out of.
Yes.
I mean, certainly it is, while the script is a kind of written form, the editing looks at the script as an idea. You're trying to see in each scene what is it in this scene contributes to this larger idea of what the script is. So yes, your script is also your raw material. You cannot, I mean, you're not burdened by your script actually. I never feel burdened by the script because like your raw material, the script is your other clue to what has to be done to the film. So often it is characterization, often it is holding moments that may not have happened consciously in the shooting, but you have to find those moments. I mean, I know in a film like Daya, which I did, the film was beautifully shot, etc. But to find a more interesting example is that I did a film with a very well-known novelist called M.T. Vasudevan Nair, and he was directing the film about an old couple. And it's a very beautifully written script. It was nicely shot, but I think in the process of the editing, what we tried, or what I tried to do, was to bring in a lot more of the physicality, the notion of how a relationship works with an older couple, which in the story itself or in the script itself did not exist, but in the shots, for example, there is a sequence where the old lady is massaging the old man's back. Now that's, I mean, it's a normal thing, but I thought, it can also be slightly sexual. They're an old couple, there isn't. So how do you add that one layer into it? How do you dwell on it in such a way? So you have to, of course you look at your material, of course you look at the...
and the serendipities of shooting also.
Yeah.
Like, you've got a moment which was not scripted, but
yeah.
it's there and it's helping you build the scene in a better way.
Yeah, so it's basically your mind is engaging with the script and the material. I think that is the process of editing, that you know what that script has and how do you build on that from the material you have. And how do you build beyond that, basically, how do you build beyond that. But it all works towards that script. I mean, I don't feel burdened by a script. I feel very lost if there is no script, in fact. I feel that the script is your clue to what you're doing with material.
Yeah, I mean, I did this film called Ishya, in which there was this scene where Arshad Varsi is fantasizing about Vidya's character, and he's doing it in the context of these Mastram novels that you get in UP. And he's, I mean, it was a really funny sequence and also very charged sexually. So it used to be our favorite sequence. But when we watched it in the flow of the film, it was, I mean, taking away from the main theme of the film, which was about this woman who wanted her revenge in her inner life and how she's plotting it and all that. And we had to do away with it. And I thought we came closer to what the film was really trying to say than when that scene was there. So it's about exclusion also. How, as an editor, you can view a scene and say this doesn't fit in to what the script or what the idea of the script is. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's usually the funniest scene. It's the best shot scene. It's the scene which has the highest budgeted scene.
So you never let the cameraman into the editing room, or camera person into the editing room.
Actors.
Never let the actors into the editing room, because this is the problem also with editing, because the charm of editing is this almost third eye that looks at material.
Yeah.
Which is very different from the way the director, and that is what you have to develop as an editor, the objectivity, or at least a notion of objectivity of looking at material. Because, without being weighed down by only performance or production or camera work or whatever, all these, big things that come in. And I think that is the thing that you bring to the editing.
Because you are the first audience of the film. You know, like, I mean, when I watch the rushes alone, for me, the emotion I feel is hopefully what the audience will feel, is what I hope. And as you were saying that don't get the cinematographer into or actors, because when you watch the rushes with these people, you notice only how it's shot, whether the hair is okay or not, whether the
ADs never.
Sorry.
No, so I'm going to steal a line from your mail to us, in which Namrata said that editing is possibly the most meditative part of the process of filmmaking. So to take that on, so what is this? Where is your dhyan? Or to actually take what Bina has said, a certain objectivity, I'm going to turn it around and say, through this dhyan, how do you bring your subjectivity, actually not objectivity, but your subjectivity into play? And so what are these elements that you are looking to, grab out of the material? What this sense, you said, a pause here, or what is a sense of time that you're working with? What is a sense of space you're working with that you are bringing to bear over and above what the cameraman has shot, what the director has imagined, what the actors hope, and so on and so forth? What are your tools to bring the subjectivity in?
For me, I think it is the love for the story and the honesty with which I can tell it. Like, I mean, take away all the dishonesty that is there in the shooting or in the acting or any paraphernalia, and that really gives me a kick, I think. I mean, and being very, very ruthlessly in love with the story. And I've seen myself that when I'm not in love, and I've done films because I want to buy a house, etc., then they haven't been that good. So I think I have to feel ruthlessly in love with that.
That's a good way of putting it, actually, yeah. The dhyan also, I think, is to, of course you have to love what you're doing and you have to believe in what you're doing. Often you do stuff that you don't believe in, but you still have tools that you would use, that would make. But I also think this respect to the fact that there is a director, and I'm very much a director's editor, if you know what I mean.
So am I.
Yeah.
I'd like to believe it.
I'd like to believe it also. That very much you have to get into that head. It's not your head so much as that head. And that is important. I think there isn't an editor who can transcend. I mean, you can't make a good film out of a bad film. I don't believe that.
You can't fix it.
Yeah, you can't fix
it
a
in
film.
the edit.
Edit, a lot of people think you can fix it. You can do sort of cosmetic structure, this, that. But I think a good film gets born with a good idea, with an honest idea, with all that, and all that has to be worked on with you as a kind of partner in crime. You become a partner to this process. I think that is the important thing. I don't, this, business of saying, yeah, I can turn it around in the edit, of course we do all this, we do all the, try and do this restructuring, you try and, you work with pace, all these things, but finally it is that material, that idea that is the only thing that can drive it.
Yeah, in fact, about this, my first experience as an editor, I feel, was incredibly lucky because I got thrown out of the film. Because I had just come out of the Film Institute and I was full of, ideas about how editors are underground directors and things like that. All film school ideas. and working on this particular film in Bombay, I started changing the structure around. And obviously the director was like, nahi, isko aise hi rehne dete hain. I say, nahi, this is not working, this is working better. I was being really forceful. And one day he just exploded and he asked me to like go and make my own film and get out of this film. And obviously threw me out. And for me, that was really interesting because I kept thinking, what did I do wrong? It was my first experience and all that. And through that, I realized that I have to play just the role of like a psychologist to the director, you know. I have to be totally non-judgmental and try and really listen, you know, what is he trying to say through this material? And I think that kind of really changed my lens, that experience.
Just talking about first experiences, Amaryan was one of my first films that I did, and I mean, you all know John was this anarchic, or I don't know if you know, but he was a fairly anarchic, crazy character to work with. We loved him to death, but I can never forget this one scene in this film, which I don't know if you all have seen, where there is this long, lengthy shot. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. And I thought it's going on and on and on and on. It's very interesting, but yeah, what's happening? So I cut it. And it was a beautiful cut, I must say, because you know how you think you're going to disguise the cut and it's all going to be so good. And John came, and John was mostly drunk, lying there and not paying attention and all that. And suddenly he stopped by at the Mueller and he screamed. He said, "You've cut it." So I said, "Yeah, I've cut it. I mean, look at this beautiful cut. It's, you know." And he was just totally insistent that the cut be removed. And I mean, very reluctantly, I must say, I mean, it was very early in my career, I undid that cut. And in the film, the shot remains as it is. And it's an amazing moment in the film. It's really an amazing, amazing moment in the film. And then I realized that, yeah, cutting is not my job, actually. It's not, you know, it's good cutting or good cutting is not really the point. The point is, again, to see beyond that, and also to, I suppose that was when you realize that you respect the vision of the shot, what the shot is telling you. You really have to watch a shot very, very carefully to see how much it holds, where it goes dead, where it has its life. You know, all these things sort of come. And it's also experience. Now I must say that I can watch a shot and understand much better, but at that point it was a sense of, and now when I look at this version, I think, my God, how did I ever think I could cut that, you know? But like you said, out of film school, you were into this notion of, you know, quickly, nicely cutting it and thinking it's a beautiful cut actually. But through, it's also knowing where not to cut, where to let material just breathe, because that is actually the beauty of cinema is, I think, when the material itself just breathes and flows. There's no need to keep sort of imposing a structure on material that is short.
And even imposing yourself and your personality. I mean, that is something that I really had to learn. That I just need to stay away from it. And probably that's why I feel it's meditative, because I mean, like, your first reaction, I mean, I feel that way, that my first reaction to the rushes is always the most honest. And then what happens now in the times of focus group screenings, so many feedback screenings, you really have to be detached. I mean, you can't get swayed. You know that, okay, even if it is not, because in focus group screenings and all, people tell you what film they would have made if they had this story, you know? कि मैं होता था ना, मैं ऐसे बना देता, ऐसे. But obviously आप नहीं हो वहाँ पे. So you have to detach yourself from that notion. In that sense, I find it You know, it's like you have to go back into that white cubicle and just say, okay, what do I feel about the rushes? What did I feel the first time I saw it?
So this word has come up 2-3 times now on looking for honesty in the material, and I would like to give that a little more body. So, for example, you encounter your rushes for the first time, and then maybe your 10th viewing of the rushes, you've already created a relationship or not, whatever it is. So, what is this honesty? What does that mean? What are those moments that you think are now talking back to you within the rushes? It's like, I want to get into a concrete sense of what is that honesty that you're seeking.
Like in case of performances, I feel we can talk about a very clear distinction. Like sometimes actors are acting it out. Sometimes it's just being the character. And I feel that makes a huge difference in how audiences perceive the film. You will not believe it when you should not be able to see action, and a lot of times you can. So there are times when you go to before the action part and use those reactions. Sometimes you take it after cut, or sometimes take it from some other shot, which is where the actor was not so alert and giving all his acting chops. So I mean, in terms of acting, of course, even in terms of camera movement, invisibility, where you can totally forget that you're watching a film and you're actually in this world. So for me, that is honesty, that you forget that you're actually watching something created.
So the 10th time you're watching the same bunch of rushes, how have you moved forward in terms of getting a hold on that, those real moments of that honesty? Like, how does it change? I can imagine both of you having to deal with rushes many times over. So what is that journey like? What relationship starts forming at that stage?
I mean, for me, I have these tricks that I keep devising. Like, I watch it on different screens. I watch it with different people. I imagine seeing small heads in front of the screen, and I see it differently. When I see it with the cinematographer, I see it differently. So at every stage, you have to step back and think, okay, how can I be objective? And go back to that first reaction.
Well, my process is slightly different. I tend to go with the okay takes. You cut it the way it's meant or it's thought to be cut. And I think it's after that that I find that I can undo and redo more easily. So I think that what happens is in a kind of rough cut or the first cut or whatever cut you call it, or just the putting together, there emerges a kind of arc which you can see through. Maybe it's a trained eye, I don't know. I find editing has a lot to do with experience. It's just the process of doing and the hard work of doing that makes you sort of, it's like a training of the eye.
Yeah, it's
that
totally
happens.
Karat Vidya.
Yeah, you have to. So, but I do find that once I have put it together in the way it's meant to be, it's easier to undo and redo and undo and redo. Now, for example, this film, again Amaryan and some of the earlier films which we did on 35mm and on celluloid, it was a crazy process because you had to literally cut and join and redo and look for 1 frame and 2 frames and all that. But now that's so much easier. So as we were just saying this morning, Control Z, Control C, these are the gods of today. Thank God for an editor. Control Z and Control C.
There's a temple in the name of Control Z.
And which is undo and copy, which is the 2 things that we really, so you do. So I find this process very good, that you do it once, you undo it, you redo it the way you think, or you, so it's really a process of sort of digging deeper and deeper and deeper to find it. There's no one way you will just find it. For me, it doesn't come from watching the rushes only. You watch the rushes again and again, you do get a sense, but you do get the sense when you put it together. For me, that is the moment of, sort of, then you start chiseling out the performance or the moment or even structure, it's like the close-up, all these come once it's a little bit there, then you sort of build and build and build.
Yeah, for me it's I think the opposite also, because probably I have worked on a lot of films with multi-cameras. Like they shoot 2-3 cameras at the same time, and then so doing the micro editing, which is the performances and setting up the mise en scène. I mean, I think I spent the maximum time doing that in the first pass. And so that I can get the best out of which camera and which is saying what, which actor is better where, profile kiska kahan acha dikh raha hai.
Entry kahan acha hota hai. Yeah, we talked a lot about that actually.
I think now might be a good time to bring in the differences or the similarities between the Malayalam film industry and the Hindi film industry, because both of you sort of really...
Both are male dominated.
That's the closing point of this discussion. No, because what we were discussing in the morning was that Malayalam cinema, in a sense, doesn't have those defined commercial versus the art cinema. Those categories exist, but there is far more give and take. There are less categorizations. It's far more story-driven, plot-driven in a sense. Whereas Hindi film industry, we know, operates at another level altogether. And it's interesting and important to note that majority of your films have been insistently plot driven. So while pace is important and stars are important, there's a lot of importance given to plot, which is why I will for now discount what both of you are saying about erasing yourselves, because the whole point of my conversation was how I see Bina and Namrata in their films, but again, that's for a later stage. So I think this might be a nice time, because the industry, the way the two industries work. For example, the Hindi film industry is so anxious about pace and not letting go of the audience for a second, whereas the Malayalam industry and a lot of regional cinema is not that preoccupied and have in a sense kept their own grammar and syntax as distinct from Bollywood. So I'm wondering if you might want to start getting into those differences of the industries you represent.
Well, I have sort of also been typecast in a way, and of course there are the Don Maxes of Malayalam, the Malayalam film industry, which do exist. But I would just like to talk a little about perhaps a film like Agni Sakshi, for example, which is based on a very, very, very popular Malayalam novel. It's a kind of, it's huge. It was written by a woman about a very changing time in society, and I edited the film. Now that burden, I mean, it was story driven, yes, it was completely based on, but the burden of the novel, which first the director bore in writing the script, and then we bore in editing this film into something that would be acceptable to an audience that knew this story. That is the thing. It's not a story that was not known. Everybody knows this story. But it's, the burden was to tell that story. Now you have, for example, a song in the film. How do you put the song in? Of course, it's conceived in a certain way, but how do you integrate the song into the structure without let's say troubling these waters. Basically, that is the point, because unlike other adaptations which I have worked on very often, where you say, yeah, it's completely, but when you're taking a big novel and a big film, and it's an important novel, the edit was so fraught actually, because we were even to use a close-up of the main character, who is this woman, this Nambudri woman who is leaving her husband. It was really, it was very momentous. Each decision had to be taken very carefully with the notion that the audience knows this story, and therefore you have, when you tell this story, you have to be true to this understanding of what the audience is believing of this story. So it's not like you're telling a new story, you're not telling a different story, you're telling a story they know, but you're also interpreting this story. You're interpreting the story from today, you're telling it today for a certain reason, you're telling that story. So yeah, so I remember we were all the time, it's not about production value. I don't know how to explain that, how choosing of shots, how you show the back of somebody instead of the front of somebody at some point, or the feet of somebody, all become interpretations of this novel. And that was the challenge, that how do you interpret this for an audience that knows it, but make it an interpretation, not a depiction of the novel, So that was a very interesting process for me, because we read the novel many times. We had done all this business of, yeah, this portion is not there, this is how it's going to change, etc. But when it translates into shots, and it translates into scenes, and it translates into transitions, then the challenges are, how long do you keep a shot? All these things became very crucial to this process. And I think the film was not very well accepted, I must say, because maybe because as filmmakers we felt interpretation had to take the upper hand, So the film was not very well accepted, but I remember that we sort of engaged a lot with this process of how does this adaptation, so telling a story is not simply telling a story. Every storytelling has a kind of weight to it that you have to sort of discover through the process of editing, yeah. I don't know if I made sense. It's just that, this choice of shots, the juxtaposition of shots, the holding of a shot, everything tells a story. And when you're trying to say there is already a story and here is another story, it's, you have to try and make that match.
So, Namrata, do you think like what Bina is talking about is a particular syntax which for me I'm seeing as rooted within a certain, the grammar of Malayalam cinema? Where do you think is the syntax of Bollywood that you are engaging with or arguing with or breaking?
It totally depends on the budget of the film. So if it's a star-driven film, then it has to be larger than life. So you make the star look as good as possible, and because he's the one who's driving. I've not done so many of those really big ones, but otherwise, even though they're plot-driven, a certain kind of engagement, I think, is required from like the producer's side. That kind of thing always exists. Probably that's why you have focus group screenings, that's why you have, first cut screening, then final cut screening, final cut 1.0 screening, so on and so forth till 17. Because I think that the whole thing that engagement hona chahiye, and People have to be glued to the screen. That has always come.
And something both of you brought up in the morning that actually it had never occurred to me is that both of you are also dealing with your material, thinking about how many times it's going to be reviewed by an audience. Not that you see a film once and that's your end of your relationship. Both of you brought it up and it actually completely
No, well actually what I did say was that I did not have to think like that, whereas she might have to think like that. I work with films where luckily I don't have to worry कि ये family audience फिर से आएगा नहीं आएगा ये लड़की आएगी. I have luckily, but I can see that it brings in another variable which can be quite
totally they say कि ये shot अगर निकाल दिया ना 3 करोड़ तो गए. Seriously, like I did this film called Should They Say Romance, where we were on a tricky territory because it was about living in, and all the focus group screenings were shit, and people were like, it's better that you don't release the film because naam kharab ho jayega, bahut bura picture hai and all that. And so in that film, the whole structure was P2C. Like the character comes on screen and speaks to the audience about his inner thoughts, and then you watch the next sequence. So in that case, because of such extreme reactions, we removed the P2C, thinking that maybe
P2C?
Point to camera, like it's a news, like how they say, but it's like you look into the camera and talk, like break the wall and talk to the audience. So we removed all the P2Cs. And then we saw the film, even we didn't understand it without the P2Cs. And people were like, "Acha, chal raha hai, kuch ho raha hai, very iconic," because that is how it was written. So we then put it back. And then there was this barter happening, अच्छा ये वाला रख लेते हैं, ये वाला निकाल देते हैं, क्योंकि इससे शायद लोग सोच रहे हैं कि ये बहुत immoral लड़की है, इसने ये line बोला, ऐसे करके. It became so difficult. So I had all these permutation of edits, that immoral edit, moral edit, this edit, that. So many variations, and eventually I don't even know which one was finally the final one. So it does make a difference because you are trying to reach out to as much audience, and I connect with that thought because even I am very brutal as an audience, like Billy Wilder said it long back that thou shalt not bore, and they keep saying it to you every day.
So the important thing is that in your conversations with the film, there is also the omnipresent producer, I imagine, whereas for you, it's between the director
omnipresent present director.
so that
director, producer, writer also. Because I'm talking about Should They See, all four of us were equally involved and equally confused.
So this might be a good time to talk about those terrible moments in the edit when something is wrong. So when you recognize that something is not working, and it might be abstract in your head, it might be concrete in your head but abstract for whoever else is watching. At that point, how do you negotiate the director, producer, target groups, yourself, your own relation, and what is it that, again, like I wanted you to sort of give body to the term honesty, what is that not working? Because it's like as a very documentary director with not so many things at stake, my biggest dread is the moment when the editor looks at a sequence you've cut and just nods and says not working. And I don't understand what that means, but I was wondering if you might want to.
Like in not working case, I always feel that okay, I can keep looking at it, keep thinking about it, go back, come back, and make it work.
So what is that not
But
working?
for me, there are certain non-negotiables. Like for me, or maybe there's just one, which is male gaze. Like I feel extremely disturbed when a woman is represented badly on screen, and I find myself in those situations very often. And for me, it's my secret mission to get this out of the film. Of course, I don't always succeed, but that is what I keep pushing my agenda. Baki sab, I feel I can deal with. You know, like try different things, work hard, but you can't change the gaze, you know, and that is what is a non-negotiable for me only.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I know a film that I did with a filmmaker called Ranjit, which became a popular film called Kaiyoppa, which is Signature. That film was shot in a particular way, and at the edit we edited it. As I said, we edited, we re-edited, we put it together, and so on. And finally, we sort of turned the film around. It becomes a flashback. It just goes the other way. It starts at the end and then goes. But how did we find it was not working? We don't do focus groups and so on. It's difficult to, I mean, I don't know how to pinpoint how when you watch a film, it's not working. You know, how do you, the edit's working, it's flowing nicely, the characters are all sort of emerging, but the story is, there's something in that story that you can't see. And I think it's only by working and looking, it's difficult to verbalize this kind of thing, but I know that film, we sort of literally, we kept watching it, and I loved the edit. I mean, I still love that edit, but I knew it was not saying what it was meant to say, which is, I mean, whatever, the story was about a very nice person who has a terrible incident in his life, and but yeah, I could just watch it, and then when we turned it around and he remembers this whole thing, we found that he became a better guy, let's say. He was almost that person that we had wanted to emerge, and that was the story actually. So yeah, it's knowing what, perhaps engaging a lot with what you want to bring out of the story.
Also, somewhere it is about what works for you, because it's really hard to second guess. I mean, so you have to somewhere trust that, okay, if it works for me, it's working. If it doesn't work for me, it's not working. Like, I remember this, I mean, from your story, I remember in Band Baja Barat, there's this sequence where the main couple, they end up kissing and, you know, getting into a physical relationship. And it was a very long sequence which led to the kiss and all that. And it was completely silent, and they had just put one flickering bulb ka sound, and for me it was beautiful. Like, I could feel that there is this attraction, this chemistry and all that. And I mean, you know, when we were doing background music, Adi said that no, we cannot keep it silent, we have to put some background music to it. And we really fought, the director Manish and me, we were like, no, we can't, it's so beautiful, silent and all that. And I mean, eventually we did not have music in it. And we went to see it in a theatre. You won't believe, people were catcalling, people were whistling, laughing. I mean, I was like, really? I mean, I couldn't believe it. So that's how it... Nobody was paying attention. It was, you know.
Also, the whole, I think this whole notion of the soundscape is also very important. Yeah. I think we also, as an editor, I try to also think of what the soundscape is, because often we don't work with the sound in the beginning, but that adds an element which is very, very important. And now, of course, with all these new things we do, I suppose you already have.
I do, because I find it that if I do sound work, it's easier to sell my edit to the director.
Okay. Yeah, so, but there's also a beauty in a silent edit. There's something, maybe it's very old school, but I get a lot of pleasure in seeing an edit just with, if there's dialogue or whatever that one track is. Somehow for me, there is a kind of, Because now I see a lot of youngsters put a music track, they cut to the music beat. That doesn't appeal to me. I still like to just work on the shots, and then of course the soundscape is in your mind and you try and sort of develop it, but there is the notion of just the shots that make for me a lot of give me a sense of the edit actually.
I would agree with you, but nobody watches that anymore. Even rough
old-fashioned editors.
Background music for the rough cut.
Yeah, now everybody puts. No, I noticed that all editors from the net, they pick up stuff and they just put it. I find that very disturbing actually. Sorry.
No, and eventually you get so used to that reference track that it's the background track of the film and you're like, oh God, we copied it.
Well, in fact for me now this business of the spot edit is also very disturbing. Because I find that
Let's explain spot editing.
Spot editing is you edit on the location now because it's so easy every day. Basically it is for directors who want to make sure no continuity mistakes, no sab shot aa gaye, ye wo. But what happens is that becomes the mindset and it's so annoying. You cannot imagine how the spot edit becomes the reference edit. You know?
True, very true.
And I mean it's done in few minutes, there's no thought, there's no looking at the shots, nobody looks at the NGs. You know, if shots are just discarded, but that becomes the reference.
Because ये है कि energy आ रही है कि नहीं आ रही है?
Energy आ रही है.
Actually,
Look ठीक है नहीं है बस. Continuity. These become the driving points, you know.
no, but it's fascinating for me because this is all, in a sense, making the whole editing process mechanical and in that sense objective. Whereas when you say we want to bring objectivity, I'm seeing Bina and Namrata into how they deal with the material. I am not willing to let you erase yourself from the edit because I really, like for example, two of the most important kissing scenes in Hindi films in the last 2 decades are from Ishqiya and Band Bhaja Bara. You know, significant. And I wonder if any other editor would have done it differently so that in our minds it's not such a significant case. You know, it's precisely because there's a certain vision that you are putting yourself into that edit, you know, and for me that's very critical. Like I will not let you erase yourself, even if that is what
when I say objective, I don't mean that we are not looking at the material with our eye. I just mean that it's an extra eye basically. And it is your eye. It's nobody else's eye but your own eye. But it's that extra eye that opens at that moment. Let's say at a different moment in the filmmaking process, which is an important moment when it's all shot and brought. You know. So yeah, that is the only objectivity. Of course it's subjective. I mean, you give the same material to two editors, it will be completely differently.
No, I'm also wondering whether how much of your gaze do you put in? For example, if your gaze does not match with that of the director or the camera person, and then how do you deal with that? So for example, you said that that objectification of women. I'm sure you are dealing with those shots all the time, but there's a way in which you are able to edit to sort of so that it's not. In fact, the clip of Kahani I have chosen is precisely because I feel it's a chase sequence and a fight sequence that is cut very differently from the syntax of a chase and a fight sequence in any other film. So
because I mean it's also a problem, but I always tend to become the female character in the film. Like in both these scenes, what you mentioned, I mean, I always put myself in that position and think that, okay, if I'm in this room with this boy and my mother comes and disturbs, that's the cut. You know, that is like cutting and disturbing the scene. Or in case of a chase sequence, like she's a pregnant woman running, it must be very hard. So I try and think like that. So maybe, I don't know, but I also think it's a problem. But mostly because I've only worked with one woman director, but mostly having worked with the male directors, I feel the male gaze is sufficiently there. So it doesn't quite disturb the balance.
But you have worked with quite a few women directors, and do you feel that there's a distinct difference, or that's sort of overspoken, overwritten?
Well, I think there is a distinct difference. Working with women, I worked with a few women, apart from the documentary experience, which is again another completely different set of challenges and for an editor. I find that working with women, maybe because of what you just articulated, I think one does get a sense of, I mean, I've always felt closer. For example, in Mitra, My Friend, it's quite a cheesy film. I don't know, you all have seen it. It's quite a cheesy film, but the process is very is interesting. I don't know if it is got to do with personality differences, but with women, I've always found that there's a lot more. There's a lot more give and take. There's you know, I do believe that the film industry, because it is so male dominated, it has a kind of patriarchal notion of what the director is, and men tend to play that role out. I worked with very beautiful, lovely people who I'm very close to, but there is a tendency to play out the patriarchal role of a director. Whereas with the women I've worked with, there has been not that sense. So I mean,
you don't have to walk the fine line. I mean,
maybe you don't have. Yeah, maybe you don't have to walk the fine line. Yeah.
Like in Kahani, there's a shot where eventually, I mean, she's on the floor, and I mean, she's just confronted her enemy, and there's a tear that falls from her eye, but that shot is out of focus. So both the cinematographer and the director were really like, Nikal, please, please, please. But it really touched me. Every time I saw her cry, I felt choked. So I just said, just give this to me. Just give this one shot to me. And every time I've seen that whenever there is a clip of Kahani shown, that shot always comes. Always, though it's out of focus.
No, but then to come to this big question of gender, both of you are working in industries that are totally male dominated, and more often than not, you would be the only woman, especially at that point of time in the process of filmmaking. So, you know, what is that negotiation like? Has it?
There's complete denial, actually, of any existence of any discrimination. Like recently, while working on Fan, we were having this lunch meeting, 20 people and discussing, and the conversation went to this place and everybody was like, there is no longer any discrimination. See, you're sitting here, what is this? You just keep saying, I mean, you just like to play the woman card, all those things. But I was like, we're 20 people, there are 19 men, and it's just me. I mean, let's just go back to Abu Jira, you know?
Yeah, that's been my story for 30 years, I must tell you, ever since I worked. But for me, the denial is, I mean, apart from presence, which is totally lacking. This notion of 2 or 3 things. Oh God, this is my favorite subject at the moment, I'm sorry.
Mine too.
Technology. She won't know how to put one plug to the other, she won't. This not dealing and knowing how to deal with technology. I know these things are said again and again, but when you confront them, it's really annoying. And also this notion of protection. Can't work late, can't go back late, can't go home, can't stay late, all this kind of thing. These things work terribly.
कोई spot को रखना पड़ेगा मैडम आप है तो रात को extra budget हो जाएगा.
This is the this is a very, it's an awful situation. It is an awful situation to confront every single film you do, this notion of that you're really a kind of a helpless person who's in this, that has to be taken care of. This I find extremely, and as a result, when I said this patriarchal notion of the director, there is also in the way they look at your work, that it sort of permeates down to even that.
There is a patronizing...
Yeah, there is a slightly patronizing kind of attitude towards your work, which does happen, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, and I think it changes with success. Like if you have a few films which have done well, or if you've got some awards and some interviews have been printed, I think it changes. Then you stop being a threat or whatever. I don't know what
you become more of a threat in my case. Nobody dare say anything to me. But you become more of a threat so that they just pipe down. But it does exist.
Yes. Yeah. No, but I would also like you to talk about very specific examples, like the one you spoke about how do you introduce Mammootty in a film. Like Mammootty can't just walk in and pick up a cup of tea. So, and similarly, Shah Rukh Khan cannot just be, even if he's playing the fan, he cannot just be a fan. So, you are also part of constructing a certain idea of both manhood and womanhood, which while you might be contesting, but the bottom line is you are working within a frame, and how do you engage with that? And for me, it's actually really important to have this conversation with both of you who have worked within the mainstream in a sense. Mainstream in Kerala becomes a very different animal than from Bollywood, but still. So what is that negotiation like?
I think for me it's about picking my battles. Like if you are showing a woman in a bikini, which is fine, because like I asked this director and he said, हाँ पर वो swimming करने जा रही है तो bikini पहनेगी ना, तो which is fine. But when you have her coming out of the pool in high speed, it's not fine. I mean, वो swimming ही तो कर रही थी ना, तो high speed में क्यों कर रही है? So these kind of things I feel I can negotiate and I can fight and go on and on and on and just like okay, cut it. It can be that. But some battles, I guess, are so intrinsic and so deep-rooted, and the patterns are so deep that sometimes you don't realize it. Sometimes you cringe when you see it in a theatre. So it's a learning ground. I'm also seeing, because I've also grown up on a male gaze, right? I also had a male gaze till I became conscious, or maybe I still have. You can't completely free yourself of how you've grown up.
Namrata actually had a really interesting thing she spoke about in the morning. We were talking about this film Ishqia, which many of you might have seen. And we were talking about characterization. And I said, maybe because Arshad Basi and Nasiruddin Shah are such fine actors, that there is a lot of nuance and a graph and an arc to those two characters. Whereas Vidya Balan, maybe because she's a limited actress, is either beautiful and very, very sexy, or she is like the Jaya Bachchan from Sholay, this sad, angry, lonely woman. And it's like scene to scene, it kept shifting. And what Namrata said is, she said it's not about the performance at all, it is about the script. The script has imagined both the men with a lot of layer, whereas the scenes given to the woman who is the protagonist in a sense, and who is very frontally there also because of the way it's edited, she doesn't have that kind of
she's
bandwidth.
either the damsel in distress or she's the femme fatale. There's not much in between.
Yeah, so that became, so it's one is working with or against so many layers embedded within it, but so that.
But like Abhishek, the director, I feel he has grown so much in his next two films because his female portrayals have really become more nuanced in Deed Ishqia and Urta Plancha.
But you know, I'm sure Malayalam cinema has delightful examples about how you had to deal with the male character. And actually, there are so many films you have worked on which are so, with women protagonists, are very, very solidly scripted in. But still, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I think I mean the challenge is all the time one to be there as the female case perhaps, but I think that happens almost instinctively. Like now, as she said, there's so much of this multicam shooting that happens. So you have 2 cameras or 4 cameras or 3 cameras. So your choice of shots itself starts plays, because I think in earlier times when you just shot with 1 camera, there was only this one option, or you had 3 or 4 which were just variations on the same thing. But now I find I have the option of choosing a shot that may not have even been taken to be there, if you know what I mean, because there is this multicam setup. You have you know, you get options which are really not meant to be there, and that is very, in fact, empowering now, because I find that you are able to, it's not only to do with the notion of gender, but it's also to do with the notion of building scenes, that now there are many, many more moments to choose from. There are many more, it's not options, it's not a question of options, but it's a question of saying that you can step into many more sort of territories of mise-en-scene actually, which did not exist, because earlier the mise-en-scene was totally dictated by one camera viewpoint which built this mise-en-scene. In fact, with the multicam, what has happened is you are creating a totally new mise-en-scene on the edit table, which is really interesting and really challenging, because you have to be true to what that mise-en-scene is actually, which is perhaps 4 people sitting around a table and talking and how this thing, but you can carve so many more moments. I find that really, and I think that also helps you a lot in how you portray women, how much screen time you give them. You know, these are all important things. Nobody even bothers about how much screen time is given to female characters, or I mean, in the case of female characters, it could be other characters as well. So one is getting that feeling much more, that you are on the edit table able to create a much more layered mise-en-scene.
So I can see one hand up.
Ma'am, you both have worked on the fiction and the documentary. In documentary, it's totally different. There you are half filmmaker. In the edit, you negativize the whole film. So, how was your experience with documentary different from the fiction?
Yeah, as I said, it's different and not so different, because even as a fiction, on a fiction film, you are trying to tell that story as you try to tell a story in a documentary. But I find documentary that you need to be part of the research. There are some other challenges. You have to be engaged with idea building. You have to, so you're not only working with shots. In fiction film, I find that my raw material is the shots, the script translated into shots. Whereas in a documentary film, I find that you need also first to engage a lot with idea, with content and idea, which has to then translate into how you put this material together. And that is challenging. It's a different challenge, but yeah. And how do you tell that story from also having a point of view, all that. But to think that the editor is making everything is all nonsense. It's not. I mean, editing is one process. It's a very, very important, crucial process in filmmaking. But to think that you're making the film, I don't believe it. I believe that every process adds to this, and editing is a crucial process, but it is not the only process. Yeah, I mean, if you have a bad soundscape, or you have a bad performance, or you have bad cinematography, you have a bad script, these all fall apart. You know, nothing. The process of filmmaking is, in fact, one of construction. At every point, you're constructing this film.
Say, there are sometimes when you intentionally put sound in just to comfort the viewers, because often in scenes that intense, if you were to not have sound, it becomes like from the perspective of a spectator, you feel a little uncomfortable. So oftentimes editor use that sound as a trick to just reassure the audience that everything's fine, the movie goes on.
It depends on your intention. Is your intention to discomfort the viewer? If that is, then you go accordingly. But if that's not your intention, then you don't.
Hi, I just had a question about the contemporary documentary, especially because we're making films today in a DSLR sort of a format. So the footage itself is coming to routinely over the last many years, say 400 hours to 700 hours. Yeah, so I mean, I worked with 500 hours. I'm sure most of the documentary filmmakers today in this room are also on an average working between 200 to 500 hours. So in that sense, I just think I want you to talk about the sort of timestamp of the film itself, given that you have this kind of flow of material. That what happens very often in fiction is that one is constantly sort of paying obeisance at the altar of intention and obstacle. Yes, that there is a character, ye intention, which is motoring him, and there is this obstacle. In documentary, one otherwise thinks that one is emancipated of this kind of a temporal frame, so as to say. I think when you have this kind of I don't know how much the footage was in Kathiawaz, for example, but the film was very, like, it was fairly zanily cut, So if you could speak a little about when you have this kind of a debris of material, and how the difference in world making sort of happens when you have this kind of a bulwark of material to you.
I think it depends a lot on the director, in the sense, like in a film like Kathiawaz, there was a script, there was a broad script, that this is where we'll start and this is where we'll go. But like when I was doing a film like I'm the Very Beautiful, we didn't know the story. We were finding the story. So in that case, it was very different. In that case, it was about finding different kinds of things. I transcribed the whole rushes and then kept going through them and removing things that I felt, okay, this is repetitive, or, and it just kind of started becoming a pyramid. It was really, had to go through everything. It was shot over 6 years and there was just so much footage. So, like that.
General question, not based on practice. But do you think that, if one sees world cinema generally, then there has been an overall discourse shifted from, say, looking at action space to looking more at time? And because of that, necessarily there's a idea of taking long takes, approaching a scene through long takes. Do you think as a result that, editing as an art has suffered because of constructing a scene, say, through snippets of space? Or it has changed from a decision of the post to a decision during the shoot? And then, as an editor, how does one respond to it? And second question is a much more specific question, is how both of you approach a rough cut? Because, in some sense, sometimes one ends up approaching rough cut like almost in a very fine manner. But then also one visually forgets certain things which could have been there. So, to approach the rough cut, to make it as, in that sense, not look at questions of pacing in the rough cut and leave it for after, also because the sound is about to happen, or do you approach it in a much more perfect manner, or near perfect manner?
more and more, I think I try and be as fine as possible. Now, I mean, with time, I try and be as close to the final cut as possible. Of course, it's not possible that you're close to the final cut, but I mean, try and keep the pacing, and also for my own sake to see if it is working, whether the rhythm works, whether the structure works. I try and do that.
Your first question, very interesting, about how shooting has changed and how contemporary cinema is actually dealing with. In fact, I have worked on a few films recently where I think the responsibility has heightened a lot for the editor. I mean, the notion of, as you say, this whole business of space cutting, you called it space cutting, has really changed, but what the editor is looking for is not the bits. You see, the point is, editing is the process of putting these bits together, these bits of time or these moments in time, and see if they work through. And that is the important thing. It is not, you know, now this notion of कि ये match cut करो, ये sequence में ये बहुत कम हो रहा है. But how do you tell that story with these various shots which are traveling in time, etc. How do you tell that story has become very important. So this process of exclusion, the process of where do you enter a shot, where do you exit from a shot, how do you build character, which shot comes before, which comes after, these become very important. So I think editing has in fact become very challenging now. Earlier editing, you know, this Hollywood style of editing was much easier because your tools were just, you know, or the tools you were using were just pace and, you know, all these things, continuity, all these were the tools you use. Now the tools is much more cerebral almost. So yeah,
it's very subconscious.
It's subconscious, yeah. It's almost that you have to instinctively build with this material, which I find really interesting because I find that now we're not, we're not worried about all these rules. Yeah, you're breaking lots of rules. And your second question was about the rough cut. No? She said she does. I, in fact, work the other way. I like very much to have a rough cut which is very loose so that I get a sense of how it's going and then work on it. Because I find that I like to sort of nudge it out a bit. So, you know, because it's just different ways people work here.
Also, audiences have also changed. I mean, with respect to the first part, that audiences have also changed. So, a lot of things, even when you don't tell, they get it. Because they've seen cinema for so many years. There's this, like, you know, in your subconscious, you know it. So, even if you don't tell, it's being told.
In your conversation about how you were looking at material, you were talking about, you know, the catching the actor in a more realistic time. Even in the multi-camera setup, you were saying that, you know, there's an angle from somewhere that kind of enters into the sequence or whatever. So it seems like you guys are really looking at the errors or the fringes of what was not expected to be there to take precedence.
Yeah, that is what I said.
Yeah. So does that influence the director back again? Because when the directors are working with you so much and you know that you're somehow like catching all these things in the fringes and giving it some space that this, I don't know, does it reflect back into the director's work?
100%.
I think so.
100%. I think it's collaborative, it's not oppositional, if you know what I mean. You know, so I mean, I think that is the beauty that the director finds, that suddenly there is a moment that did not exist or did not imagine that it exists, can be created.
Yeah, because we are in the same boat. So You know, I mean, they also feel thrilled if they find something that they had not seen on the set or something they had not really planned. So those serendipities are always welcome.
Thank you for such an interesting discussion. I mean, you as editors have such an insight and a cross-section of insight that I feel quite greedy, you know, with a lot of questions. How do you see this and how do you see that? But I'm just curious that, you know, a few of the most beautiful things that editors have such a kind of deep sense and understanding of is duration, the passage of time, silence. And from several of the examples that you spoke about, or the conditions or the situations, that illustrations that you gave, it seems, you know, these, it's very hard to survive with any of these three in the conditions that you're working in. And I mean, you're talking about, you know, the patriarchal director, or the you know, the worried producer, or the anxious writer, or and so on.
Insecure star.
Insecure star, and so on. But you also got in the context of this earlier thing that I was saying, you also have a pretty strange audience, actually. Which is continuously changing. It's very hard, even at this moment you can see that your audience, just the way they're thinking, the way what they like, what they don't like, and so on. So from the point of view of filmmaking, putting a story together, choosing the way you tell a story, the way you construct a story, and so on, and the question of silence and duration and success and failure, do you, over a period of time, sense a crisis?
Of any kind. I would say yes.
Even I would say yes. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much explosion, there's just too much stimulation that sensitivity is going down. So, I mean, things that would make you, touch you earlier, and it's not the same anymore. You know?
Also, people's reading of images has changed a lot. You know, people, the savviness of the audience to imagery, at least from my time, has changed so much that all the time you're confronted with the problem of what does this image represent to your audience today? This is very complicated. It's very, very complicated. A close-up आप वहाँ लगाओगे. You think that this close-up is to be there for 5 seconds or 8 seconds or whatever. I mean, but is that close-up being read in the same way? Because the audience is so used to seeing close-ups and so used to interpreting close-ups in a certain way. And it also has that syntax of close-up matlab emphasis, you know. So it's not about is it a moment in performance, is it a pause in the story. All those nuances are difficult to sort of bring again to the audience. That is the crisis. How do you deal with an audience, as she says, that is so savvy and is so used to looking at images in a certain way, that when you try and put it slightly different, or you want to put it slightly differently, that meaning sometimes does not come. You know, it's like you want to hold a shot longer, right? I think you were talking about, Yasho, you were talking about how you were told by Samira to, you know, you want to hold that shot longer, but you don't know if your audience is going to either have the patience or look at the shot. Will they observe why you are putting that shot a little longer? These are crises. I mean, this is in fact the crisis of editing, in a sense, I would say, because as you say, you're forced by so many people that, but frankly, I've been lucky. I work with directors who have sort of given import to these notions of, or at least thought about this. So maybe one has been a little luckier. Yeah, there is.
I mean, in a local train, somebody is watching your film on a mobile phone, and suddenly, you know, you're also peeking in, and suddenly the most important point, he starts talking, or the station comes, and it's gone. I mean, that way. And I mean, we call it subsea cutting editing, where in TV, you know, you have to cut for people to be working simultaneously. कि सब्जी भी कट रही है, सीटी भी बज रही है, and still everybody is getting everything. I mean, it's not fun.
Where do we go? You know, I mean, do we learn how to do the sabzi cutting, or do we get out of the paradigm? Do we disregard the you know, the anxiety of success?
No
where do you see?
No solution.
I mean, it has to correct itself, I think.
And I think there are no solutions. I think, as she said right in the beginning, it is it's like your own truth in a sense. You know, either you believe that this is the way it is to be done, or you move into that. I mean, you discover that, but there is no solution to say, yeah, there is an alternative. But I know there are filmmakers who can only make films in a certain way. I mean, Girish can't make a film. You can't tell him to make a sabzi cutting film. So that is the truth also. No? But on the other hand, there are filmmakers who can make it only that way, or want to make it only that way. So there isn't a solution. I think I, as an editor, when I say I'm a director, I mean, I will cut a Girish film differently from perhaps a film for Ranjit, who is, you know, a very popular filmmaker. I would cut it differently. But does that compromise my position as an editor? No, but because I believe that film is what I'm meant to cut. I'm taking that film because I know it's meant to be cut like that. Yeah, so I bring my best skills to make that film happen. That's why I said I'm a director's editor. I'm not here to make the film. Then I can go and make my own film. Yeah.
Yes, that's what the first director told me.
I'm getting signals, so I have a long closing statement which I'm going to deny the pleasure. Sorry. Sorry. And so anyway, thank you so much. This was quite a privilege, and thank you for doing
I don't know how good one is at verbalizing all these things, but there is nothing but hard work. Editing is not, I mean, it's just not verbal. It's difficult to talk about how do you choose a shot. Is it only performance? Is it only good camera work? Is it only this? No, it's something else. What that something else is, you learn by experience, I think, yeah.
Just keeping at it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.